All right, so when looking at dimensional analysis, what you're doing is you are converting units. Sometimes you're doing 1 unit conversion, and other times you're having to do double unit conversion. So what you want to do is set up your problem with your goal across from it, and then you want to see what needs to be converted, and then circle the item that needs to be converted. I recommend you use a color to correspond so that you know what you're working with. After that, you can set up in between the 2 items using a conversion chart, and you want to only work with 1 unit at the time. So let's just say if you did your top units from the ratio with blue, you want to start with blue and only convert that 1 unit. If you're doing a double conversion, then you would use the next one, which would be like green. And in order to eliminate a unit, you must set it up diagonally. So that's the critical piece right there, so that you can eliminate what you don't want and then put the item you want on the other side of that fraction. Then what you want to do is look at a chart, or maybe you have it memorized from memory, and you want to put the larger one with the 1 and then the smaller one with the conversion. For example, if I had to convert 60 seconds to an hour, the hour would have 1, the 60 would pertain next to the seconds. Once you have it set up with your fractions, you just do multiplying fractions, which means you multiply everything on top to get an answer, and then multiply everything on the bottom to get an answer. And then once you get to this step, you will divide to get a mixed number, a fraction, or a whole number. If it is a fraction in the end, you should simplify it completely to what is needed. So for example, if I gave you some sample problems. So if I were to say that the car was able to drive 110 yards in 10 seconds, what is the distance in miles per hour? So what you would have to do is write down what I gave you. So 110 yards per 10 seconds. And then what I said you needed to do was convert it to miles per hour. So I do it a little different than the video. You can try to squeeze them in between, but sometimes you don't know how many conversions you're going to do. So what the first step, again, you want to do is look at it and say, all right, what do I need to change? My top pieces, if you look at the ratio, it's distance over time. So I'm going to say, all right, well, my distance is yards, and my distance needs to convert to miles. That means that this must change because yards are not miles. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to write it down below my yards, and I'm just going to start with this. I'm not even going to look at the bottom yet. Okay, so miles to yards. Now, if I start with yards, how do I get rid of it? Well, in order to get rid of something, you have to cross cancel. That means that yards must go diagonally so that you can eliminate the word yards. Then you go ahead and you put the miles, which is what you want, on top. All right. Now what you need to do is look at a conversion chart, or maybe you have it memorized, and you need to ask yourself yards and miles, which is larger? Miles is larger, so that's where the 1 goes. Then in a chart, you will see that there are 1,760 yards in 1 mile. Now I'm going to double check. Is miles what I want? Yes. Okay, so now I'm done with the blue. Now I'm going to go back up to my original problem, and I'm going to look at the seconds. Seconds needs to go to hours. Are seconds the same as hours? No, they are not. That means I need to do another conversion box. But instead of looking at the blue, because the blue pertained to distance, that was the unit of distance, Okay, and distance again, that's your ratio, is distance to, and remember it can be written with the colon or with the word to, distance to time. So we're actually technically looking at speed, guys. All right, come back here. This time, I'm not looking at the top because the top pertains to the blue. I'm not doing blue. I'm working with green. Okay, so now I need to look at the green. If seconds is on the bottom, to get rid of seconds, it has to be diagonal. Seconds then goes on top. Awesome. Now I know I can get rid of seconds because it's cross-canceled. But I don't want seconds. I want hours. Ooh, I don't actually know how many seconds in an hour. So I'm just going to first convert it to minutes instead. That means I don't want minutes. So then I'm going to have to do an extra conversion for the green so that I can make it easier. So sometimes you might have to do a double conversion, especially if you don't know the change. All right, now I just go in and for the time, I fill it in from a chart or from memory. I didn't know seconds to hours, so in my head, I'm going to go seconds to minutes, minutes to hours, because that I do know. For this, I know there's 1 minute and there's 60 seconds. Then for this, I know hours are bigger and there's 60 minutes in an hour. Now I have everything done. So the next step says to multiply everything on the top and everything on the bottom. At this point, I highly recommend you just rewrite it so that you don't make the error, and it would be 110 times 1 times 60 times 60. I've done everything on the top. Now I go to the bottom. 10 seconds times 1760 times 1 times 1. My distance, what are my distance for my units? Because we need to make sure if we're asked questions, we have to get it correct. The top is going to be in miles because that's what we wanted to get. And the new unit on the bottom is going to be hours. So it's important to write that. Now you just simply, you can grab your calculator. Once you write this down, this is required, and you can punch it in. If you were to punch in all of these values up here on the top, you should then get 396,000. And on the bottom, when you multiply all of this, you should get 17,600. Now, I just need to divide the top by the bottom because fractions are division. And when you divide these, your answer then should be 22.5. And what are the units? Miles per hour. So miles per hour. It can also be written like your unit rate, 22.5 miles over. Some people will just put 1 hour. It will rarely be written like that. So I prefer that you have general understanding and you would know that this would be the answer right here. So in a word problem, if you were given let's say the chart, because stones, we don't normally know that measurement. Sometimes they will give you that chart conversion in the problem. So for example, you were looking at stones. 1 stone is equivalent to 14 pounds. If you were to have 95 pounds, what would that be in stones? Round your answer to the nearest tenth. Okay, so looking at that now you know you need to go ahead and convert over what you have. So the scale they gave you was 1 stone equals 14 pounds. even though that's in the problem, guys, you just have to think of that. That is the chart piece, which means that's the piece that goes in one of the boxes. All right. And then they told you 95 pounds needs to be converted to stones. All right. That means I am just looking at a single conversion. So we'll only be using one color. So I have 95 pounds, okay, times, if you don't want pounds, pounds must be at the diagonal. That way you can cross cancel. And instead of pounds, I want stones. Okay, now that I have this set up, I go and I use my chart. It says for 1 stone, there are 14 pounds. Now I do simplistic, 95 times 1 is 95. 14, technically there's always a hidden 1 under there, but it's 14. Then you get 95 over 14. You have to remember that you got rid of pounds, so your answer is going to be stones, and it's important that you have the proper unit. When you divide this, you get 6.78 stones, and it says to round to the nearest tenth. So you find that 10th place, which is your dimes, and you look at the next one. 5 or more round up. So that means this is about 6.8 stones. So that would be a single conversion. A single conversion, you are only changing run units, so you wouldn't have green, you would just use the blue. All right, so you got a word problem, and they told you that the perimeter of a rectangle yard, the sides are 4 yards by 6 yards. And they told you that it's $3.75 per foot. And they want you to then figure out what is the cost to fence the yard. Well, the first thing you need to look at is you have to identify, in order to fence the yard, to find perimeter, you need to then figure out what is this perimeter. Well, perimeter is adding up all the sides. So perimeter equals all of these sides. So 2 times your 6 and 6, plus 2 times the 4. Otherwise, you can just do 6 plus 6 plus 4 plus 4. All right, once you do that, you then have the perimeter. So the perimeter for this yard is going to end up being 20 yards needed. Now you have to say, okay, we want 20 yards, but keep in mind, the cost is in feet. So at this point, I know my yards need to convert to feet because that's what the cost is. So you're going to need to convert to feet, and then however many feet you need, you times it because it says the word per. So per means times whatever your feet are. All right, so my first thing I need to do is convert. I put 20 yards times, do we want yards? No, since we don't want yards, then yards needs to go on the bottom and feet need to go on top. Now, thinking from the chart or knowing it from memory, for every 1 yard, there are 3 feet. Then you need to convert this. Remember, all whole numbers are technically over 1, so that's the top of the fraction. So 20 times 3 is 60. That means that this is equivalent to 60 feet. Now that I know we need 60 feet of fencing, I need to do 60 feet. So that's the amount needed. So 60 feet times your cost, which is $3.75. And when you multiply those, you'll get a grand total to fence this whole yard of $225. So sometimes you'll have more of a complex problem where you will have to be thinking geometry and thinking what is the perimeter. So perimeter is adding up all sides. Area is length times width for a rectangle. then you will have to figure out, okay, well, if we're getting a fence and you need money, you need to times that by the cost to get the final cost for the project to be completed.